we are now live with the one, the only, Kate McCullough. Hello, Kate. Give a wave to all of
Hello.
our young people. How are we doing? How are we
Hello
keeping?
there. I'm
Oh,
good, thank you.
I noticed there's a plaster on one of your fingers.
I know, that's my COVID injury.
Oh no. Oh, God forbid. Kulabila. So, with that, would you like to give maybe a short, brief, possibly intro of what it is you do and what your role entails?
Okay, that could take a long time.
I decided to go with a good big one to start. So, what is your role within the film
Uh,
industry?
so I guess there's a couple of different like titles that have been given to me over the years, and it depends on which situation I'm in. Like if people ask me what do you do, you know, like if it's a car insurance company or something, and they're like, "So
Yeah,
what's your profession?" It's like, okay, photographer, like because they just don't know what a cinematographer is, and it just becomes complicated. And
yeah.
then they might have like cameraman as an option, but I don't tend to like that one too much.
For
Uh,
understandable reasons.
and then if I'm at a wedding or something, then it might be like, you know, camera person or camera woman. People tend to understand that.
Yeah,
Then like with uh, young up and coming filmmakers, we can start to use the term cinematographer
yeah.
or
And I
director of
think they're going to
photography.
get your lingo anyway. Could you explain to us a little bit about your role as a cinematographer, Kate, and the department you're working with and the people you're in contact with most?
Hmm. So yeah, so I'm basically kind of a second pair of eyes for the director, like to kind of realize what's in their head onto the screen. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, my number one point of contact from the beginning is the director. Um, and the main challenge is to actually start to understand what's what's going on in their head, which can be
A
of varying
challenge.
degrees of difficulty. Some people are much better at sort of accessing, communication to
Yeah.
sort of help that process. And some people you'll connect with, sorry, immediately, and others it might take some time to kind of get there. But I guess that's kind of part of it in a way is like when you go for an interview for a job that you
Yeah.
might sort of recognize that it's just never going to work with that person, like
And do you
so
think did it take you a while to like establish that dynamic or like to read the room or the people that you'd be working with as regards to know if there was going to be like, and I know we were talking to Paul Walker yesterday and he was speaking about the relationship as the scriptwriter and the script editor and how you can gain like kind of just an energy or a vibe from somebody to know that that's going to be a good working relationship.
mm,
Would you
mm.
see that within the director and yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that it has taken me quite a while. I think because I always like, well, I'm probably sort of naively optimistic that it'll work out. That's
Yeah.
my kind of uh
See the best in people, Kate.
my go-to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I suppose for many years I would sort of maybe just say, oh, we'll find a way. Whereas now I'm probably a little bit more like, okay, no, this isn't like. I'll also maybe recognize that in a script that it's not necessarily my strength. Like
Yeah.
uh, like just from reading the script
Yeah.
and getting the feel of it.
Cool.
Then I'm like, okay, no, this isn't my cup of tea, or it's just not going to be a good sort of beginning. So it
Yeah.
does take a long time. Well, it took me a long time to sort of figure that out because I was just kind of keen to experience all sort of approaches to filmmaking, and I was sort of like, excited by different approaches and different characters and different situations. And so I think,
Yeah.
especially with documentary, that was my kind of in point. And
Yeah.
so I think you have to be quite an open-minded sort of individual to sort of inhabit that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I had read that you had done like initially a lot of documentary work, and you'd explained that that's quite like small crews that you're working with, so you were able to establish that like relationship and dynamic. But coming out of that then to work on bigger productions, do you think it helped to have the foundation of doing documentary and all that that kind of entails visually alongside kind of starting with smaller crews and then building to be part of bigger productions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a really good kind of workshop for me, like a workshop space to kind of gain confidence and to sort of figure out how you might tell a story. Like, I think my character, like, I was quite shy as a kid, and so it's actually taken me quite a long time to just sort of be comfortable with, even picking up the phone and calling people. It's still kind of like a sort of a weak point for me. But like, I think just documentary allowed me to kind of, just gain confidence in sort of, because like each day you're faced with a completely different challenge, and you have to talk to people, like you have to engage, and it's all about sort of gaining trust with the people that you're filming with, and that they become comfortable with you, and that there's just kind of like a mutual respect and exchange.
Yeah.
And so, I think also, for me, a lot of documentary was sort of sitting back as well and just allowing what was going to happen and sort of find a way around it.
Yeah.
And at a certain, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's gas because Freddie, one of the people kind of leading this project, actually worked with you on a previous project. He never said the name of it, and he said you were like so chill, so relaxed. He was like, it was so cool. And from somebody who, like, you say that like things still kind of scare you, and the kind of socially it can still be like quite scary, which is kind of relaxing and kind of grounding to hear as well, that it's kind of it's a natural kind of human instinct, but that you can still give that air of being in control. So
yeah, I mean, actually, because I'm currently kind of doing a documentary with Ken Wardrobe, who I've collaborated with many times over the last few years, and I haven't done documentary for like about 2 years. So just when COVID came around, it seemed like Ken was kind of keen to go and talk to people and see what was going on. And we were filming with a 85-year-old lady about 2 days ago, and she was sort of observing the two of us. And Ken has this kind of high energy. I don't know whether you've ever met him, but
no.
he's sort of like he sort of, he's there in the room, like when he comes in, he's just such a kind of bubbly, kind of high energy character, and just because he sort of bumbles his way through, that people then kind of relax themselves. Like, he makes people just feel very comfortable themselves, that like anything goes kind of thing. But then I'm sort of like the counterpoint to him, and she was just observing that I was like this kind of like very calm counterpoint. And I kind of forget that, because I just think, well, I am myself. I don't,
Yeah.
But it was interesting that she just noticed that within the hour and a half that we were with her,
Yeah. And like, did you always know, like, from Kate, I don't know you very well personally, but you seem to kind of have like an introverted personality, would you say? Do you think, like, were you always drawn to film, or what instigated it in your head as a young person?
I think that I spent quite a bit of time off school because I had like pretty bad asthma as a kid. And so I just sort of ended up kind of making stuff at home. I'd be sitting at home and I'd be like, okay, what'll I do today? And I would just end up kind of trying to build things, or, sort of make and do stuff. And then that kind of developed into kind of drawing and painting. And then sort of about what was it, about maybe 12, 13, my dad got me a stills camera for my birthday. And then it was like, you know, that opened up a whole sort of world. Although I was remembering there, Laurent, that in my transition year, we had a module, photography module. And after it was only like for a month or something. Afterwards, the teacher was like, Kate, whatever you do, don't go into photography. Like it's not there for you.
Do you think of that moment when you're at like awards, or if you're like, if you're going to something and like you get to receive something and you're like, told you so? Sit with the happiness.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I actually had a lot of respect for that teacher. Like he actually really encouraged me to go to art school. I mean, he actually was like, "Oh, you need to like, you know," because I was painting a lot and stuff, and he in his head, it was like, "Yeah, you're going to be a painter, or you're going to like, you know, go the sort of traditional arts route." And so when he said this to me, I wonder actually in hindsight whether it actually sort of was a kind of reverse psychology thing.
Maybe he planned it. Like,
okay.
You never know. He planted the seed.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess I was just sort of figuring it out. Like, and then I think at a certain point, I kind of thought, oh, you know, I don't really want to work on my own. I mean, I think that was a kind of very narrow traditional idea of what going to art school was, you know, or you know, going into the arts was like, you know, you work as a painter alone or a sculptor, you know, but of course, you know, artists collaborate all the time. So
Yeah.
I didn't understand that it could be another way. And so I had started watching sort of documentaries in my teens. My mum got me like a, you know, VHS from Extravision, and it was like Hoop Dreams, which is like an incredible basketball documentary, and it just totally opened my mind to the possibility of, you know, how I could sort of use photography maybe to, you know, just go and explore the world.
And you've done a lot of traveling as well, through the progression of your career. Has there been any highlights or high points from places that you visited, or even new landscapes to be able to capture?
Yeah, like I kind of forget actually how much I travel, because I looked at photos there recently. I was just sort of trying to clean up the laptop. I was just like scrolling through, and I'm like, wow, that was only, you know, 3 years ago. I was in Colombia in the jungle, you know, filming with a sort of, I mean, I guess they're maybe termed as a cult group, but in my mind, they were just sort of like a community. Yeah, like just like if I scrolled through photos from any given year, you know, it was like the Gambia or LA or New Mexico and like Sweden. Yeah, it's just funny to see all of them. I mean, there was just sort of a crazy period there for maybe 5 or 7 years where I was just kind of, you know, from month to month, just flying everywhere. And like, it's incredible way to see the world, but it is quite demanding. Like I literally just didn't have any other kind of life going on and just about kept the relationship going. So yeah, it's quite a different job in a way to what I'm doing now. Like, you know, I think with drama you can sort of plan a little bit more. Like you'll take on a job and you know, okay, I'm going to work for these 3 or 4 months on this project and then I can take a break. You know, it's okay to take a break. Whereas when it was documentary, like, yeah, I don't know what's going to come up next. Like it really was living from month to month. Like it was tough.
Yeah. And did you find that very, very different then, obviously, when the old COVID came along, and kind of put a stop to the works? Did you find it challenging creatively, or did you go back to that young person that was like, oh my god, bit of painting, we'll start creating stuff at home, flat pack furniture?
Yeah, 2 things happened. Like Ken Wardrop gave me a call about doing this documentary that we're doing now, and so that was like, okay, this is kind of an opportunity to go and have a look around when we're not supposed to be out and around. So
carefully, of course, following all procedures.
Yeah, I mean, we were filming outside people's houses, looking into their house, so it was, you know, very safe and everything. But and then the second thing was that we just kind of dug up the garden. So I spent like a whole kind of 3 or 4 weeks there, just kind of doing serious growing of vegetables. And I think there was just this like, you know, sort of adrenaline that's like low level anxiety and sort of adrenaline of like, okay, you know, let's have our own supplies in a way. So
I think it probably kind of gave your, like, with such a busy schedule, it probably gave you a sense of like rejuvenating, going to the garden and getting
oh my god, it was and I think there's like, of course you have downtime between jobs, but you're still kind of switched on to an extent and sort of looking to where the next job is coming. So it takes a lot of energy to actually switch off and be okay with being off work, you know. And when COVID happened, it was sort of like, okay, nobody's working. You know, there's no FOMO.
No, not at all.
Sort of like, there certainly was a kind of a calm to that, and I did appreciate just the sense of like, hey, let's just kind of format the drives here, and am I happy with where I am in life, and all the parts to it. It was kind of a nice sort of opportunity.
And what we could do now is possibly show your own showreel, Kate, because all the young people are very, very excited to see you, but maybe some that wouldn't. I'd say they will, some spots throughout the showreel they could recognise, but we might throw that on now and give them a taster of the work that you've done. So the lads might give me a shout when that's on. So I hope the students enjoyed that. I certainly did. And is there any point with, like, for through all those productions, Kate, is there any kind of standout moments for you? Any favourites? Can you pick favourites? That's also a difficult question.
Asking who's your favourite. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that, like, I definitely at the moment I'm enjoying drama. To it's just sort of ticking all the boxes for me. Like, it is interesting going back into documentary now, shooting, but I certainly am reminded why I moved away from it, on a level. So, yeah, I mean, I think probably, like, with normal people, it was certainly a kind of step up for me. Because I haven't actually done that. I'd done one TV series prior to that, drama. So, it was a step up, and it was also kind of, a chance to work with really great people. And there was just I think, like, the producer on that job, Catherine McGee, she just was very smart about who she cast as, not in terms of actors, but crew. She talks about casting the crew and just this idea of, like, of course, there's so many people that are technically capable to do the job, but it's just sort of choosing the right sort of, personality as well, because it's a huge part of how the whole sort of energy of the set comes together, and that that you're all kind of working towards the same end point. And it sounds simple, but
much harder said than done. Is that the phrase? Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that, and I think there's a couple of the young people had mentioned those questions around how important that dynamic was between yourself and the director, and that communication, and trying to kind of detail what it is you're looking to achieve to them. Is it hard at times to be, like, open, or is it hard to kind of translate your ideas?
I think that initially there's always a kind of a teething period, and it's trying to kind of find what's the best way to communicate. So whether it's, like, through, I mean, normally for me it's like images, in a way that, like, you can say, okay, this scene's going to be cold, but, like, there's so many varying degrees of cold, and so we both have, like, probably completely different images in our head. It's like reading a book. Everybody takes a totally different kind of image from it, and so it's quite subjective, whereas if you've got an image, you can immediately go, okay, this for me is a cold image, but why? Like, what? Or like, it's maybe that the characters aren't kind of communicating, or they have their backs turned away from us, or it's like, there's just, like, within an image, then there's so many more layers to it. Is it what they're wearing? Is it the size of the frame? The time of day? And so, yeah, it's just trying to find what's the best tools. Like, I guess the other big sort of step in terms of communicating and starting to get on the same page is going to locations. So, you know, you can be talking in an office and have, you know, all these incredible ideas. And then you get to the location and it's like, oh God, it's tiny and the walls are white. And so it's like, well, okay, is this going to work, or can we use this to our advantage, or is it going to be a complete nightmare?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like locations are massive, and it just starts to kind of put reality on, you know, this sort of concept that you have up here. Then it starts to kind of like, okay, you have to find a meeting point for those two, you know. So I don't know whether that answers the question.
I think that was stellar. It's like you had that all ready to go. Amazing. There's a couple of questions here in the chat, and one that kind of a lot of young people kind of wonder about is that transition from possibly dabbling with it in school, going to college to possibly study film, and then that transition out to the industry, where it can seem very scary and daunting. But to go through that process, what was that like for you? And did you find there was any challenges or any tips that you give to young filmmakers?
No challenges. Easy peasy.
Lemon squeezy.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a kind of twisty turny kind of road. If I think back, like just all the various kind of step forwards and half a step back, and okay, try this avenue, no, try going this way. So I think, you know, a lot of it is maybe people that you meet along the way. Like I remember when I finished, I just finished in Dún Laoghaire, so I'd done like 4 years in Dún Laoghaire College, and I got a call from Emer Reynolds, who was an editor at the time, and I had known of her name, had seen obviously films that she had worked on, and you know, she was on the board of the college and had seen some of my work, and she basically just phoned to say, you know, you're doing like great things, and you should, you know, keep going, and like that she was sort of excited to see where it might go. And she also put me in touch with Dervla Walsh, who was working as a director. She's doing like The Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that now, Fargo and all the rest of it. So she's like very well established. But at the time, she was still sort of making her way in the UK, and she was doing like a sort of series of short films over here in Ireland. And so I ended up working with her. Like that was nearly one of my first jobs, and I didn't know what I was doing. Like, yeah, it was like totally, you know, just I guess that Emer had sort of seen something in my work and then thought, oh well, you know, she's young and keen, and also I guess probably, you know, she was thinking it'd be nice to encourage women to, you know, a young woman to come through.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I actually then ended up working with her on numerous films in the last number of years, and that's just been lovely, like the kind of circular action of that, you know, that just, you know, one phone call and then, you know, we just did a commercial there 2 weeks ago together, and so it's just it's kind of becomes then a lifelong collaboration and sort of like friendship in a way. I think people that you find that you connect with and work with, then, you know, it is kind of a community and a friendship. So I mean, sorry, I've kind of gone off a little bit there.
No. And I think that stands out as a moment as well, trying to find your feet within the industry, like as a woman, presents its challenges anyway. But to have like the role models that stand out. So you were saying like your art teacher was like, no, photography isn't for you, Kate. Don't even think about it.
No.
Reverse psychology kind of switched that for you, and that there was people who had an eye out and were willing to help through the progression through college. And would there be any advice for any of the young filmmakers that we have for establishing those connections, whether it's showing your work to people or asking for help on projects or trainee positions on different shoots and stuff like that, for trying to, even if you are feeling reserved, to try and take that extra step out?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I came out of college, all I ever heard about on set was sort of like these horror stories, like within the union, say the camera union, that was like, you know, cups of tea thrown at people, like because it wasn't, you know, the right temperature or whatever, and it's like, wow. and people just getting really bad backs from carrying things and stuff. And I think that, you know, that almost seems like kind of like it's dark ages in the sense when I see now how, you know, diverse the film set is. Like, you know, you just have people from all walks of life, and also, you know, there's definitely more women coming into the camera department. I mean, it's still slow, but it is changing. And I think that, you know, even if you're not sure, like, is that the department I want to work in, you certainly start to get a feel of either this is for me, or actually I'm much more interested in the art department over there. What are they at?
Yeah.
You know? And so I think just to get, you know, get a trainee job is a great way to sort of see just how the whole, you know, set dynamic works. And I think I probably shied away from it a little bit because, again, it was like, it felt a little bit daunting, and it was just the kind of horror stories of like being an assistant. And I actually, when I finished in Dunleary, I had done kind of a load of short films back to back. Like I think it was about 9 shorts, and by the end of it, I was like, whoa, okay, totally burnt out, and I'm not actually sure I want to do any more filming. Like I was sort of like done with it.
You're ready to go to the vegetable patch. Settle down.
Well, then, so I went and worked in a homeless shelter for a year, and that just gave me a chance to kind of step back and sort of like think, okay, is this actually what I want to do?
Wow.
And then I actually went off to Poland for a year because I just felt like the type of filmmaking that was happening here was quite sort of orientated towards the American approach, American and kind of UK. And I'd started to get interested in European cinema, and I was sort of like keen to see kind of an alternative way to storytelling. I mean, it's not that it's radically alternative, but I guess what I discovered in Poland was that it was much more kind of image based and less kind of dialogue, and more kind of not so overt, I guess, in how you communicate through images.
And is there any like pockets of, was it like film festivals? Like how did that get instigated for you? Obviously the year out probably gave you time to like process it all, but what was coming up that made you realize that you wanted it even more? Was it like the film festivals, or what drew you to Poland? Like,
yeah, it's a good question. I think like also at the back of it was kind of like I wanted to get away from just, you know, I guess just push away from my kind of family existence. Not that there was anything particularly traumatic happening there, but I think, you know, I was quite close to my sister, like growing up, and maybe sort of was in her shadow a little bit, and sort of like always kind of sort of following around to see what she was up to, not necessarily doing what I wanted to do. And so I think I just sorry, I'm giving you a whole family history here, but like I think it was definitely kind of wanting to sort of push I'd kind of challenge myself actually, and just see, could I, you know, learn another language, Polish, and I didn't make it easy for myself. And then you know, just sort of like exist in another culture. And I think that was it. You know, maybe if somebody had offered me to shoot a documentary abroad, it might have done the same thing in a way, you know, like just kind of taking myself out of the comfort zone. I think that I don't like kind of settling into, once I start getting too comfortable in a sort of lifestyle, then it's sort of for me kind of time to move on and sort of try and challenge myself again. And I think that's probably what happened with documentaries after 10 years. It was sort of like, okay, I know how this works, and it's sort of like, you know, I guess what I like about filmmaking is that you are learning each day, and I kind of maybe reached a point with documentary where I felt like I wasn't necessarily learning as much as I wanted, or kind of being challenged as much as I needed to be challenged. So I've certainly put myself back in the deep end again now.
Just dive back straight in there, Kate. There's a couple of questions here, and there's loads of questions coming in, so I'll try and jump to as many as possible. But there's a question from Camille about what is your proudest moment so far? So the moment where the cheeks go and you're properly chuffed.
Oh God. I don't know. That's a very hard question.
It's a tough one to say for yourself as well. But was there a moment, like in anything that you created, or like, as you said there, like kind of going on those learning curves, that you feel like you really had like overcome something, or had taken on a new challenge that kind of was worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess life is kind of all these like waypoints of like where you feel like you've kind of accomplished something. I mean, there was something kind of interesting with normal people in that, like, you know, a lot of people that I know personally wouldn't have seen my work for whatever, you know, they're not watching documentaries, or they're not watching kind of art house, you know, they're not going to festivals, and yeah, okay, maybe it was in the cinema, but like, you know, they're not going to see that kind of thing. And so it's not necessarily that it was like pride, but there was just this very nice feeling of like, okay, people, you know, that I went to school with are watching normal people, and they can see, okay, this is what Kate does. And now they have kind of a better understanding of like, you know, what it is I get up to day to day, because a lot of the time I think it's quite abstract. Like, you know, people are quite used to seeing photos of directors, you know, sitting by the camera and like pointing and stuff.
Doing what they do.
And then you're like, oh, well, actually, normally that's where I sit. It's just that the director was maybe checking the frame or something. You know? And so, yeah, I think there's still a lot of like day to day, like going back to what I, you know, when you ask me what the title of my work is, or, you know, how you sort of introduce yourself, like there's still a huge amount of kind of smoke and mirrors with what happens on a film set. And, you know, it's great what you guys are doing, because you're bringing just that whole level of understanding of how, you know, the mechanism of how films are made, because it's such a kind of dark art in a way. Like, how are all these images put together? And even just like sound design, like even for me, I'm starting to understand other departments more. You know, I'm kind of pulling my head out of my own department, because you get so involved in it and you realize, oh my God, there's just so many kind of subtle decisions being made all along the way, that have a huge impact on how even the image is received. You know, if you've got like really crap sound, or sound that's thin, or it's not like rich or dense, then the image is going to come across as, you know, quite mediocre. So it's, yeah, I mean, I often think like, you know, on a film set, in order to kind of all work together, you have to realize that you're all quite vulnerable in the space. We're all trying to figure out, we're all under pressure, we all have this idea of what we want. And so it's just like being aware of that to sort of navigate your way to where you're trying to get to.
And do you have, like, even kind of embracing that vulnerability, it can be sometimes you're fighting a losing battle to be like, oh, I'm trying so hard, but this person's being difficult and I feel like I'm not getting recognized, to kind of take a step back and appreciate that kind of democratic space. But do you have, for like the young filmmakers we have now who are going to possibly go to film college, going to do trainee opportunities, of like how to have that self-belief in what's happening, and to embrace that process, that everybody has a role and you're all just a cog within the system? Any tips for how you kind of overcame how maybe overwhelming it can be?
I
give you a really hard question.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I was thinking recently, you know, I, as a teenager, from about 8 years old, I started to run quite like intensively. And so it kind of became a thing for me. It was like trying to, you know, strengthen my lungs because I had asthma. And so it was like all of a sudden, sort of, instead of it being a disability, it was sort of like, okay, you know, actually my lungs, if I, you know, give them some attention, they can carry me quite far. And so I think the discipline that I learned there, like the sort of endurance running and the sort of sense of like each day, you know, you go out and you train and it's like, you might not actually run that well, but it's the accumulation of all these days that you put in, and then you go and race, you know, in 6 months time, that it's sort of, that's your moment to kind of shine. And I think, like, you know, it's important just to kind of pace yourself, you know, like, I mean, maybe I probably took quite a long while to to get where I am like this. I'm sure there's people who've, you know, flown through it much quicker pace rather. But I think what worked for me was just to sort of, like, I think I have probably a kind of a quiet belief in myself that sometimes it's probably totally naive as well. Sometimes it's better not to know like how hard something's going to be. But I think if you just have like this kind of gut feeling that like this is what you want to do. I mean, like when I think actually in Dunleary, I remember there came a point after, I think it was the end of second year, and you had to choose a discipline that you were going to specialize in. And we had sort of like, you know, tried all the parts, but I had spent quite a bit of time in the editing room. Like I pretty much edited for 2 years. And at the end, so then the editing teacher was like, okay, so you're going to specialize in editing. And I was like, you know what, I just have this feeling about cinematography and I don't know like what's sort of driving it, because obviously I hadn't picked up the camera, I think, until the very end of second year, because you know, there was all these, like, it was a bunch of guys basically and then it was like me and like 2 other girls, and yeah, like they were just very confident, and they were like, you know, a lot of them had already done some, you know, filming and stuff. And so I just kind of sat back and observed, and yeah, I was trying to just think again, like, okay, what is it? Why did I come to the school in the first place? It was because I had, you know, always been, you know, making images, whatever way it was, whether it was drawing or painting. And so I just had it in me that I was like, I need to try and give that a chance. Like, of course, editing is another version of that, but it's much more kind of story orientated in the way that like you're ordering story, whereas you're not kind of, you know, creating the images, you're ordering the images as they come in. And it was actually a brilliant way to, you know, to understand how the whole, like, I think actually you learn the most in the edit suite.
Yeah.
In a way. So if you can shoot your own material and cut your own material, you really learn, you know, where you've gone wrong or what works, what doesn't work.
And the process of it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know sometimes like some young filmmakers, they love the camera or they love the sound, but to see it the whole way through, it seems like you did it in reverse. in Dún Laoghaire that you understood how you were creating the visual narrative at the end, and then wanted to go back to instigating it from kind of those passions that you always had when you were younger.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, definitely I would suggest, because I mean, you can get like free programs. I mean, actually that showreel that you saw there was something that I edited myself a couple of weeks ago, and I hadn't edited in years. And I needed to put something together quickly, and I thought, oh well, like I'll do it on my own. And I just found iMovie program or whatever for free.
Well, there you are. Like, for somebody who's like, oh, I haven't touched it in years, it's top quality, I would say.
Well, yeah, but what I mean is that, like, like it's very easy for us to actually just shoot on our phone, and once you have an idea of what story you want to tell, you can put together something quite quickly. Or even if it doesn't work, you've actually learned why it hasn't worked, but you've seen the whole process. And I think a lot of times there'll be cinematographers or whatever that don't really engage with what happens down the line. They don't see what didn't work, or that the editor was like really trying to put things together. Yeah. And for me, like, I just find the whole run of it fascinating, like from kind of just sitting down and discussing the script to getting on set to afterwards then color grading and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I kind of often wonder, like, if my back went out suddenly, like, what would I do? Because I'm not really trained in anything.
I'm sure you'd find something
specific. But I thought actually what I'd probably do is go and work in a hardware shop. That's one of my favorite places to hang out.
Well, like, I suppose just after the whole of what we've come through with COVID, it isn't the worst place in the world to, and it goes back to your love of making things. So
yeah.
That's really cool. But would you have any advice for, like you were saying, the dynamic? I think it is progressively getting better, but being so few girls within your group, did that ever make you feel kind of overwhelmed, or feel like there was less opportunity for women in film? And what you would have, like, what advice you would have for young female or gender neutral young people today kind of progressing through the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, that's my personality, is to kind of push against, like, the teacher telling me you shouldn't do photography, and I'm like, okay, there's a thing for me now to try and figure out. And so maybe the fact that there was so few women, then I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to try and burrow my way in here. I think because I was quite sporty, in my teens and stuff, I did spend a lot of time hanging out with guys just on a football pitch and stuff. And so I quite like, the dynamic and sort of, it doesn't sort of daunt, it's not sort of alien to me to step onto a set full of guys. But of course, like, I think ultimately we want that to sort of balance out, and sort of, it's always like, I think on Normal People it was actually like 53% women.
Wow.
Which is very unusual. Yeah. Now the camera department, we only had one other woman, but yes, we're going to change that. But I think, for what advice, I mean, I think you just have to kind of believe in yourself. Like, I think people are much more aware now of, like, being open to having women, and actually, in a way, there's probably never a better time to be a woman if you want to be a cinematographer, because they're so keen to have female HODs. So actually, that's right across the board, like, costume, production design, whatever. Like, there's definitely a huge push. And okay, you don't want to be getting a job just because they want to balance out the gender numbers, you know, it's that's not something that I agree with. It doesn't end well, you know, if you've got somebody in the wrong role. But ultimately, if you can get a balance in there, I think it's healthier for everyone. You know, it's just a much more considered environment to work in.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, interestingly, I just joined or got invited to a group called Illuminatrix in the UK there a couple of months ago, and that's just a platform of female DPs, and so there's a kind of a WhatsApp group and emails, and so we're all just kind of, you know, it's a community, and actually it's kind of incredible for me because I just, you know, it was kind of lonely here in Ireland. Like I have to say that, like, it was you're just kind of an other entity, you know, and so for so many years just kind of blocked it out. But like a couple of weeks ago, I watched Illuminatrix had 6 female DPs on a Zoom kind of webinar call, and it was amazing just to see. I don't think I'd ever seen 6 female DPs in the one space, and I had just realized how kind of hungry I was to just kind of see, wow, okay, that's me. Like it was like looking in the mirror, you know, for the first time.
It's your tribe.
Yeah, it was amazing and just really empowering in a way. And so I think just the more visible we can be, you know, I did a lot of probably hiding behind the camera for many years, but yeah, I mean, opportunities like this just to speak to young up and coming DPs that aren't men. Sorry to all the guys. It's just it is definitely, like, you know, it's good to see that. So
absolutely.
I'm sure you have you got some female or gender neutral.
We have a really good balance this week, actually. All the young people watching, we have a gender balance across the table, which is really, really cool. And for everybody to be able to work in that kind of inclusive and collaborative space. I think it just echoes what you were saying about connecting with Illuminatrix. I got it. And how there's always going to be, you're not always on your own. There's going to be people doing the same thing. They might be in the minority, but being able to stand collectively is always a great help. And
I mean, you're already like at an advantage, you know, age 16 or whatever, like learning how to make films, you know, that's like already 10 years ahead of where I was at, you know, like, I mean, it's incredible to already have a sense like, okay, this is what I'm interested in, or you know, this is my kind of modus operandi.
Absolutely.
Like, so
and to take kind of pockets from what you were saying there, Kate, about like self-belief and being able to collaborate or taking on a challenge. I think all of that, trying to, obviously it's a challenge, but trying to instigate that when you're younger and you're creating that, you're always, it's going to be a learning curve. Would you have, because we're coming towards the end, do you have any top tips for that process of like criticism or your work possibly being like, oh, you have to improve on this, this and this, to not be in like weeps of tears? I don't know if it happened like in the editing room in IDT or when you started playing around with the camera again, that what helped when you're messing around and you're trying to explore and discover things for your confidence?
Yeah, I mean, actually, interestingly, in Poland, like, it was quite a different sort of learning culture there. And so what you ended up doing is you made a film, and then they had a cinema where you would project, so it was all on film, and you projected the film, and then there'd be like a commission of maybe 10 men. and a lot of older guys as well, and they'd sit down in the back of the cinema and they'd be like, "Oh, what's this shit? Like, like, what are you doing with the camera? Why are you on her now? You should be on him." And it's like immediately, like they're just not holding back. Like it was a total kind of jolt to the system. Talk about being put like,
yeah.
And it was brilliant because you had to just kind of develop this like skin and sort of defend. And okay, so you might defend what your choices, but actually afterwards you're like, you know what, they were totally right.
You just don't tell them that.
And so that's kind of instilled in me, like since Poland, just to be open to criticism. And actually I find it's very hard to get somebody to be honest, and probably it's going to get harder as well, as you kind of gain status, whatever, that you're not getting like honest feedback. But yeah, I think it's really helpful to look at your stuff and just, I mean, it can be really hard. Like I'm my own worst critic, because I'll just sit there and I'll watch it and I'll have all the conversation in my head about, like I can't watch it as a film completed. It's sort of like, oh, why didn't we, we should have shot that earlier, or we actually didn't need to, do all those shots. We could have shot it in two, or
Yeah.
So it's this constant kind of conversation. And I think that's the learning, that's the figuring it out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've gone off and
no, this is all really gorgeous information, which we're very, very grateful for. And we're coming to the end, but I'd love to possibly, I'm just going to notify the lads that we'll probably end with a rock, if that's okay. And we'll see that out, so the lads can see your work there as well. And that kind of fantastic kind of composition of, oh my God, amazing. We'll let them enjoy it. But we just want to say a huge, huge thank you for your time, your advice, your wisdom. And we hope to talk to you very soon.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.
All right, nice to meet you.
Ken is her though.
Oh, Monjarki. And then Mac Mudefer. Betsy Kelly.
Deserter.
Pwy mae sgeilin ffrwtsa. Mae'r fyd os o gawlach. Gwrhan yn ffwyl lad.
A lot of your tenants have been struggling, sir. There's already been some cases of starvation.
Nonsense. Crops have failed before and mortality levels have been perfectly acceptable.
That's all idea. I'm not hooked to learn the hundred so sick my house.
They will not be singing songs about Patsy.
Good I done that. Just how home.
You're gonna tell me what you did?
You shouldn't know with the noch to home.
Munt u wat die omleg van velen?
Kif harlas a sagan?
You're harlas a sagan. Shall I do no